So this week's History Corner, we're going to talk about something we talk about a lot, which is the Immortals. And for all we talk about it, I think it's a very problematic award. I kind of wish we didn't have to talk about it. But what you can't deny is what a success it's been. And in many ways, it was a very unlikely success. So I want us to just unpack the origins of the Immortals and, have a look at how we got to where we are today.
This will be good for me. I mean, you've given me the odd overview of this, but to hear it in detail for me will be awesome.
Yeah.
Because in my view, it's not only a great award, it's the Immortals of awards.
Yeah. So when the 8th Immortal was inducted, which turned out to be Andrew Johns in 2012, the great Ian Heads, what can you say about Ian Heads? What a legend of rugby league he is. First ballot Journo Rugby League Hall of Fame. So he was Rugby League Week editor at the time. So he was involved with the planning of the Immortals and all of that. And he said, it was a concept which has grown in stature into something never even faintly contemplated those 31 years ago. Which is really appropriate because I didn't realise until a few years ago that it started as a promotion for Port.
Think about that. Port.
Yeah. So I'll read you more of Ian Head's description of the origins of the Immortals.
Is there a more rugby league drink than Port?
There is not. So again, this was from his 2012 address to induct Joey Johns. Like many of the best innovations, it was back then an idea plucked out of thin air. First thoughts belonged to John Fordham, and quite possibly over a longish lunch, considering that his companion was a robust individual who grew to become a legend of the wine industry, Brian McGuigan. Most of you probably know the story of Fordham outlining to McGuigan the value that lay in a commercial involvement of his growing wine business with the game of rugby league. So, long lunch, McGuigan and Fordham talking about, if there was anything they could do to merge wine.
How old must have John Fordham been?
Yeah, he couldn't have been that old, eh?
Yeah, but he's been involved in every significant thing.
Yeah.
Since then.
So then the idea was born. McGuigan and Fordham took it to Ian Heads. Ian Heads brought Zorba into the mix because he was the New South Wales editor at the time.
How did it succeed? There must have been a few crates of wine falling off the back of trucks or something.
Well, get this. This is a contested assertion because John Fordham thinks it played out differently. But Ian Heads said that Zorba was actually the one that came up with the term Immortals.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm flabbergasted that Zorba is involved in something successful.
Yeah. So, I mean, the funny thing is that the word immortal has a much longer association with rugby league. Rugby league news, which you've heard me mention on the show many times, it's the precursor to Big League, was the official publishing organ of the New South Wales Rugby League from 1920 to 1973 when it became Big League. In the early 50s, they had a column called Immortal where every week they'd shine a light on a former player. So I like that touch. I don't know if that was a conscious thing at the time, but so the word immortal has a long association.
It must have been. It must have been in the psyche of the conspirators.
Yeah. Ian Heads was good enough to grant me an interview last year, and I actually asked him what came first, the Port promotion or the idea for the Immortals. and he couldn't give me like a clear answer. I think the truth is lost in that long lunch at Double Bay or wherever it might have been. But yeah, so in the past week I've gone back and read through those Rugby League Week issues in the lead up to the announcement of the awards, try to get a sense of was it a real award with an alcohol promotion, or was it an alcohol promotion with an award attached to it?
Either way.
And so it's murky. It's murky. I can't say one way or the other.
Be like saying the fucking Oscar started off as a promotion for Kahlua or something like.
So to be fair, Rugby League Week did talk about it as a real honour, and this is going to crown the best players since the Second World War. But it was a subsidiary of McGuigan's called Elliott's Wines. The mention of Elliott's Wines was never far away from the surface when they were talking about the Immortals. So I'll just read this from 6 weeks before the Immortals were crowned. 4 weeks, sorry. At a meeting in Sydney 2 weeks ago, a distinguished panel of judges made their choice of the 4 greatest players of the post-war era. Those 4 players will be honoured in a magnificent promotion by leading Hunter Valley winemakers Elliott's. A superb box set of 4 bottles of Elliott's 1977 vintage port, paying homage to the 4 greats, will be released on July the 2nd. The wines will carry biographies and pictures of the 4 players, accompanied by scrolls telling their stories. We at Rugby League Week regard this as an event of great prestige for the game of rugby league. The port series, the Immortals, will quickly become a collector's item.
Unbelievable.
And enthusiasm for the award was built with the addition of a reader prize, where if you wrote in and guessed the same Immortals that the panel of experts did, prizes include a trip to London, and then minor prizes of a weekend at the Hunter Valley and lunch at Brian McGuigan's estate.
I can't believe it. I really hope that Chook and Clive Churchill and that got a whole bunch of port out of this.
Oh, they received editions 1 through 4 of the commemorative port. The judging panel, who I will name shortly because they play a big part in my story, they received 5 through 7. There were 3 judges.
I reckon Chooks was going first night.
And apparently the issue where the Immortals were announced sold 80,000 copies. So there was a lot of buzz about it, and I think the game was crying out for something like this. But even in the immediate aftermath, I can't fully establish what was more known, the advertisement or the Immortals. I know the box set of port is an immortal of the alcohol sales game, taking its place along other immortals such as Tooheys Draft Twist Top, $7.99 a case, and a Long John Scotch, $10.49 a bottle. So esteemed company there in the alcohol advertisements of 1981. And there was an article the next year where a golf writer was talking about golf doing a similar thing, and I'll just read this out. Can you pick the 4 golden legends of Australian golf? They will be featured on the labels of a pack of 4 choice gold medal wines later this year. This is a follow-up to the highly successful promotion in which Rugby League's Clive Churchill, Reg Gasnier, Johnny Raper and Bob Fulton were voted the Immortals on a wine pack. Okay, so at the moment, it's looking more like the alcohol's winning out. But then, on July 2027, so not even a full month after the announcement, we saw there could be one earlier, but in my research, the first reference to, the way the Immortals is used now, it's like an OAM, it's
better.
Yeah. Like you can't say Johnny Raper without Rugby League Immortal Johnny Raper. Yeah. And on July 27, the Canberra Times ran this article. Rugby League Immortal Johnny Raper will be the guest of honour at a pie and footy night organised by 2nd Division club Valley Statesman. Okay, so, all right. It's not, lunch at Kirribilli House. I except we're working in the field of rugby league. But from not even a month after the award was crowned, you're already having it added as a prefix to their names.
I'd like to know at what point it become so fixed in the lexicon that like you'll hear someone someone was getting into Rothville one day saying, "Oh, why are you wrapping up this guy so much?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry." So he played as Hayne. He goes, it was that big run he had. And he goes, "Oh, I'm sorry. So next time someone plays like an Immortal for fucking 6 straight weeks, I'm just going to ignore it, am I?" And then Mark Guy would say something like, "This guy's attitude, he's playing like he's an Immortal." So it's used in that way. As a benchmark.
Yeah.
I'd like to know what year that kicked in.
Yeah, that's a good one too. So regardless of what you want to say, it worked. Whether it was just a fortunate accident, you can't deny the impact it's had and how good it's been for the game ultimately. The other aspect of it I wanted to talk about was the actual voting process.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
So the judges for the award were Frank Hyde, Tom Goodman, and Harry Barth.
Who's Tom Goodman?
So Tom Goodman was a journalist for the Herald, and he'd been writing about rugby league since the 20s.
Wow.
So you had Frank Hyde come of age and play in the 30s, Harry Barth in the 40s. So you had, and obviously, Frank Hyde's record speaks for itself. Harry Barth as a player, as a coach, and just a real thinker of rugby league.
Yeah, perfect guy for it.
Yeah, so three guys held in the highest of regard.
Let's just have a bit of musing on this. The importance of journalists to rugby league. Just the impact they've had on the game through every era. Incredible.
Yeah. Like that, the Ian Heads generation, him and Alan Clarkson, Jeff Prenner.
Yeah.
All these guys, sadly departed Mike Gibson and,
Well, do you remember when Peter Frelingos died?
Yeah.
It was like the fucking Purpose died.
Did you know Peter Frelingos is responsible for Parramatta being called the Eels?
No?
Yeah.
How'd that work out?
So I think Parramatta, the Aboriginal word, has something to do with eels.
Right.
I could be wrong about that. I can't quite remember. But anyway, Peter Frelingos is the one that first started referring to them as that.
Wow.
Because they were one of those teams that didn't have a name when they started.
Perfect.
Yeah. Just while we're having a few asides, I was reading a few Tom Goodman articles in the lead up to this, and I found something that I think you'd like. This was a story on South Sydney legend Jack Rayner, who was a stalwart of that early 50s South dynasty. League administrators should be determined that Rayner's outstanding qualities should not be lost to the game, even when he's retired from the playing arena. So, as far back as at least 1954, we were worried about losing players to the game.
It never ends. It never ends.
But so we'll turn to the voting itself. If I could be anywhere in history for one night to be witness to something, this might be it. This is a lengthy quote, but I'm going to tell the story in Frank Hyde's words. So bear with me, because I think it really needs to be read in full to actually get the sense of it. It was a long and exhausting process, one of the long nights of my life, in fact. The three of us were ensconced in a city hotel. The task began about 6 p.m. The method used was as follows. Individually, we wrote out our list of the players we rated the best 100 in rugby league since World War II. We then checked the lists, each against the other, eliminate any player who was not on the three lists. Then we reduced the list to 75 players, and from that point, just kept reducing. At 2 o'clock in the morning, we were still reducing, down to 12 by that point. By the same process, i.e. that not anybody on all three lists was automatically eliminated, we reduced the numbers to 8 and then to 5. At 5, we were deadlocked. Hopelessly, it seemed. At that stage, we even considered asking the organisers to make the promotion the 5 Immortals rather than the allocated 4. After some discussion, we rejected that and pressed on. At this point, with the working day near to its dawning, we changed our method. We decided that one of us would pick the 4, and the other 2 would have to justify which of the 4 would be dropped if the 5th player was to be substituted. Finally, around 4 o'clock in the morning, we made the decision. One great player had been left off the final list, and we had our 4 Immortals. I've never named the 5th Immortal, and I don't plan to do so now. As far as I'm concerned, his name will remain behind the door of that room in which the three of us met that night. Suffice to say is that he was a player encompassing all the attributes of a champion, one of the all-time greats, and recognised that way. But when it came down to the crunch, we debated whether we could drop Churchill, Raper, Gasnier or Fulton. We decided that we could find no reason to justify dropping any one of them in favour of the 5th player. I'm comfortable with the men we chose, although the thought of the 5th Immortal and how close he got nags me now and then.
That's spine tingling.
Isn't it? Like, to have those three guys sitting in a room.
I love the gravitas they gave it, even though it was probably an alcohol
Yeah.
at that point.
To hear Harry Barth and Frank Hyde and Tom Goodman just sit there debating the best players they've seen, like.
So we know now from history that was Langlands.
Yeah.
It was the fifth immortal.
Yeah. So we'll get to that. I just wanted to. Ever since I read that, it's been like a dream for me and you and some other dickhead to book a hotel room and like do something similar.
Well,
like
I was going to say, it reminds me of the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Discussions.
Yeah. So
same sort of gravitas.
So we book a hotel room and do the same thing. 100 players, whittle the list down. Then I thought of it like, if I was to tell my wife that I was going to leave her and my son for a night to sit in a hotel room with you and talk about footy players, I think she'd rather I was cheating.
That would be awesome.
But so the fifth immortal was Langlands.
It must have been tough, Fulton or Langlands.
Yeah. Well, true to his word, Hyde never talked about it, even after.
What an absolute man of integrity he was.
Yeah. Do you know, after or in the midst of his broadcasting career, he used to lead supporters groups on kangaroo tours.
Nothing makes me happier than ex-players and identities leading tours.
But 20, 30 years after, he would have an annual reunion at, I think it was like Canterbury Leagues Club or a place like that, where people, like just average punters who had been on these tours, would gather with Frank Hyde every year and talk about,
what a legend.
Yeah.
What a legend.
Mm-hmm.
I used to look at them in the 90s and go like, but I think fucking Zorba had one.
Yeah.
I was thinking, like, can you imagine going on this tour, like, how much they'd be phoning it in and stuff like that? Getting on the piss and trying to fight you. But it's like, I mean, Frank Hyde, that would just, what a gentleman.
Yeah. But yeah, so he never revealed that it was Langlands, but Harry Barth wasn't so opposed to making that known, and he actually said it to the man himself.
Well, he was St. George, so he probably felt he owed it to him.
Well, yes and no. He and Langlands didn't have a great relationship, from what I can gather.
Do you think he did it to spite him?
I'll read out the story as Langlands tells it. We went to a carbine luncheon when I was living up at Southport. On the way home, the lunch had been held in Brisbane. Harry Barth came and sat next to me and said, "You've got the shits because you weren't picked in the Immortals." I replied that I wasn't angry and said, it's got nothing to do with me, whoever they went for. Harry then said, "It was me that didn't vote for you. I went against you." I said, "All right, fair enough." He said, "Well, the reason being is that I didn't think there should be 3 from the one club being in as Immortals." To this day, I'd rather not know who went against me, Langland said. And this was a kind of widely known thing. Couple of quotes. This was Brian Chickamore. "When the Immortals came out, I said, 'No Graham Langlands.' I was just totally amazed. Anyway, I've heard stories, as you do in football circles, that because there was already 2 St. George blokes and they wouldn't make a third. Also, I've heard that one of the selectors didn't particularly like Graham," which I think is probably Harry Barth. I think Harry Barth was coaching Australia in the late 60s, early 70s. And when you've got like blokes like Langland, Smith, Artie Beetson, etc. in that team, I think if you're an old school disciplinarian like Harry Barth, you're gonna.
And even that's rugby league to have a personal vendetta impacting your decision. What about the quote? "You've got the shit." Not a question. Have you got the shit? It's a statement.
So of course, Graham Langlands did get in with Wally Lewis in '99.
Well, it was way too long. Why did they wait so long?
It's funny. I mean, I don't know, but the funny thing was, it was only supposed to be Wally Lewis. The original brief was the best player since the first Immortals were picked.
Oh, thank God they put him in.
Credit to Ken Arthurson. This is Ken Arthourson's book telling the story, so I don't know if this is the whole story.
Let me guess, it's Pro Arco?
Yeah. So even Ken Arthurson, a bloke who would campaign for Scott Fulton if he had half a chance, he said how pleased he was to see Langlands get the nod. Even if he did it with a very Arco-like self-service. He said, "I'm delighted to say that I was a part of Langlands being named an Immortal because I became a selector for the Immortals. I, along with some of the other selectors, said, well, look, we always felt there was an injustice as far as Graham Langlands is concerned, and we think we should bend the rules and include another player. And that's how Graham Langlands became an Immortal."
It's perfect exactly how it is now.
Yeah.
That they've righted that wrong.
Yeah.
I think it's one of the few fucking good decisions in rugby league.
Yeah, absolutely. Just something really heartwarming, especially in the wake of Gasnier's death and, you know, Langlands and Raper's diminished states. Langlands never really, if he was aggrieved, he never came out publicly and talked about it.
And that's very un-rugby league.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, if you're running a bar in the Philippines, it's not going to be fucking... You've got time to be aggrieved, isn't it?
But so probably about a decade or 15 years ago, he and the other St. George Immortals formed a little group called the Saints Immortals. And he said this: "It's a pity it's taken me 20 years to get into it with these other two blokes, Gasnier and Raper. What we're doing at the moment is good. We're touring the country areas and we're trying to promote the game in these areas. It's just great to be in the same room as Reg Gasnier and Johnny Raper."
Beautiful.
Yeah. As a Dragons fan, that, you know, gives me tingles.
Well, I mean, we haven't seen that much of him. That clip you put on our Facebook page recently, just incredible.
Yeah.
And every person that you respect in the game will just say he's one of the top 7 players of all time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Kevin Humphreys actually said that he thought Langlands was the best out of all of them, you know.
Well, that goes to show how good Gasnier must have been.
Yeah.
He hasn't got the numbers,
no.
the short career with the injuries and whatever. He must have been fucking something else.
And this is the one of the last things I want to touch on, because Frank Hyde in his autobiography was at the end tasked with picking his 4 Immortals from 82 to 95 when the book was published. He picked Wally Lewis, Peter Sterling, Brett Kenny, and Gene Miles.
Wow.
The Gene Miles pick, I think, touches on what we're trying to do with the Hall of Fame and some of the struggles to get it right, you know. By the way, the feedback's been fantastic. We really appreciate the conversation. Let's keep it going, because the criteria is a work in progress. I'm happy with the players we've put in, but the sanctity of the hall must be preserved. But Frank said this about picking Gene Miles over Menenga. "Pick the Immortals 2 on pure records, Menenga would be number 1. But there's a lot more to football than cold records on a printed page. I came down to pure football in my choice. And for me, Miles was and is the man."
It looks like they chose pure football from the first Immortals as well.
And that's why it's so hard to just go by stats.
See, that's why if Inglis comes back and maybe wins another comp, he's an Immortal.
I think talent-wise, he is absolutely the best player I've seen. He's probably not in the top 5 or top 10 of best careers I've seen. But some of the things he does, ball in hand, at full stride.
It's all going to depend on how he comes back.
Yeah.
If he comes back and becomes the elder statesman and just carves up Thurston-esque, he'll be an Immortal.
Just to finish up, you know, we talked at the start about trying to work out whether it was alcohol or a real award. And I think I'm going to give it to the real award, because that's what it's become. And
it became a real award when you had men of that stature treating it with the respect they did.
Yeah, exactly. At the time, the port itself was billed with the following: "It goes on sale to the public this week and is expected to become a collector's item for sportsmen and non-sportsmen alike. I had a look today. You can get a box set of Immortals Port for $75.
Original. I'm getting you that for Christmas. That's it. Done.
Yeah. So yeah, the Immortals.
Wow, that was beautiful.
Yeah.